Hello again everyone, it's me, Madame Macabre, and welcome to a new video. I apologize for being a little bit sloppy in this video. Today I'm melting. It feels like I'm dying of heat stroke. It's been a very sweltering day here in Washington where we're not used to this kind of heat. I know you Southerners are used to this kind of 100-degree area, but to me it's foreign ground. I'm comfortable in the 50 to 60 degree territory. So to me, I'm not down with this. Anyway, to get back on track, I have another story time to share with you guys that this sweltering heat reminded me of. Once again, this is a story that revolves around my friend Shadow Kisses. As you can probably start to put together now, there's a pattern. There's been a lot of weird stuff that has happened around me, and that's happened around Shadow Kisses. We tend to attract this stuff. It's whatever. I guess the ghosties like us. Well, to get on track once more, basically this happened, I want to say, a year ago when Shadow Kisses was living at an apartment it used to be in a very, very old building. I won't say the name of it just because the nature of where this story goes, it's better just not to mention it because, you know, personal families and all that. So anyways, this apartment complex was originally a hotel built in the Victorian era. And it was, back in the day, super fancy, grand, like, had a ballroom, had the whole works and everything. Nowadays, it's kinda, it has not been updated since the probably, like, Victorian era, honestly. It's really, it's essentially like the hotel suites were converted into apartment units, so they're really small. It's not the greatest in the world, but the horror story isn't bad updating and renovations, no. See, the interesting thing about this place is because it was such an old building with such a history to it, you can imagine there are some things attached to it, both good and bad. And it would have been one thing just to deal with those, but there was another event piled on top of all that. So, to get started, I'll explain some of the things that happened before the big storytime event. So, this old building has essentially what is now kind of in the basement of it is where the old ballroom used to be. And that's one of those places that is generally off limits to people. However, at the time, Shadow Kisses knew somebody who was working as a maintenance man down there, so he was able to get down there. And it's one of those places where it feels a little bit off when you go down there. Not necessarily malignant, but definitely off. Well, interestingly enough, this maintenance guy actually went down there one time, got this off feeling, and decided to take out his phone and just snap a picture. And he actually caught something that is pretty interesting. The first time I saw this photo, all I could focus on was like the other guy in the picture. I'm like, what? I don't get it. Until my eyes refocused in on the mattress. There's something a little bit interesting about that. I don't know exactly what it is, but to me, it kind of makes me think of like almost a Victorian era, like a maid's apron or something with the triangular shape. I don't know, do you guys know something more similar what that looks like? That is just something that I thought was a little bit interesting about this place. It's just, there's a lot of history in that particular area. There's another building that's practically across the street from this that is the old clock tower, and that place is supposed to be horrifically haunted. Like, lots of people have killed themselves there. It's a mess. I can't make promises, but I know somebody who knows people who might be able to get us permission to go in there and do a ghost hunt. I'll get back to you on whether that actually will happen, but that is a possibility because I got that connection now. Anyway, so this area has a lot of history to it. So it was during the summer, like between July, it was about July. So it's like dead heat, it's so hot. And there was actually a case where one of Shadow Kiss's neighbors across the hallway actually passed away in their room. And because of the heat of the summer, it caused things, even though they got them out of there pretty quickly, it caused things to smell pretty bad. pretty bad. Okay, if you have not smelled a decomposing human body, count yourself as lucky, because let me tell you, there's nothing else quite like it, quite as horrible and disgusting. It's the worst thing I can think of smelling. Now, the reason that this is relevant is because of where the story goes. So remember, there was previously, a couple weeks before, one of the neighbors had passed away and like it had smelled really bad for a while. So now, time passes, off and on, like Shadow Kisses is getting like whiffs of like nasty, foul stench, and she can't figure out what it is. She's thinking maybe it's, still left over from that neighbor down the hall or whatever, and she just ignores it. But strange things start to happen. She is in her unit, and specifically, there's one wall in the unit, the wall that connects to the neighbor on one side, and it's a little bit interesting because just in that particular area things happened. One time she was in the dining room and a can of soup, she had a guest over at this point in time, a can of soup just like rocketed itself off the shelf and just flew across the room and hit the wall. And there was nothing that could have caused it. It flew with immense force. It wasn't just like falling down and dropping. It just, pew, it was out of there. So that was a bit of a sign. But more and more weird stuff started to happen. She started to feel a presence in her bathroom, specifically in the bathroom, and it would make her uncomfortable and she wouldn't want to spend much time in there if she could help it. She felt like something was watching her. She would often feel as if something would be tugging on her clothing. There was a time where she had a guest over, she was in the bathroom, and she had the door open because she was just messing with in front of the mirror. And her guest was still talking to her. And as she's doing that, she feels a sudden chill and like gets goosebumps. And all of a sudden, she feels a really sharp tug on her shorts. And she's about to freak out, but she looks over and her guest is just pale and frozen in fear. She saw it. So not only did Shadow Kisses feel it, but her guest, her neighbor from downstairs, saw it. She physically saw the shorts move at the same time she felt it tug. So she was getting a little bit freaked out to the point where she actually borrowed one of my crucifixes to put in the bathroom because she was just too spooked by the bathroom. Well, more time passes, there's more incidences, like she feels cold spots and more tugging in the stairwell to get down, and she was up on like the 5th floor or something, and the stairwell was, I won't lie, it was pretty creepy in an old building. It was giving me like Grudge vibes, that stairway scene. Anyway, so there was a point in time where I came over. Now, all this stuff started back in about July. Or maybe, no, way back in June, I figured out after the fact. So the incidents that Shadow Kisses was experiencing started in July. What I'll tell you in a minute actually happened back in June. But when I encountered this was all the way in August at this point, so 3 months. And I come over to visit Shadow Kisses, and I get out of the elevator on the 5th floor. She comes to greet me, and I walk out of the elevator, and I just get hit in the face with the worst smell I have ever smelled in my entire life. And it was the unmistakable stink of a human carcass. Now, at this point, even though it had been months since her neighbor across the way had passed, she's like, I don't know what else it could be. Maybe they're still dealing with garbage. Maybe they were recently renovating or something and some of that smell got out. But it was just like a cloud of this, like, I almost got sick. It was horrible. But like once we got away and into her unit, it was fine. And well, in hindsight, it wasn't the neighbor that had passed across the way that was responsible for this smell. You see, it was the smell of a human body, but it was not that neighbor. It was another neighbor. You see, the wall in her apartment that was against another neighbor's unit, where all the things had happened, the soup flew across the unit, like she was feeling tugged on, felt like she was being watched. The neighbor on the other side of that wall, right on the other side of that wall, the neighbor was an elderly gentleman, and he must have passed in his sleep because he was still in his bed. And his bedroom, where he passed, was the wall that connects to her old unit. And the sad thing is, this was an elderly gentleman that a lot of the neighbors liked. However, and they would always check on him on a regular basis, and they couldn't contact him. He wouldn't answer his door. And something that's actually pretty creepy is that for a while when I was going to visit there, I kept passing the door, seeing all these notices and stuff tacked to the door, like tons of notices for bills that hadn't been paid and all that stuff. But I was just assuming someone was just, not paying or whatever. But in hindsight, it's actually pretty sombering to think about. But all these neighbors really liked this guy, but he had gotten sick previously before pretty badly, and they assumed that he had been away at the hospital, that, one of the kids, someone must have taken him to the hospital, and that's where he had been. However, after a while, Shadow Kisses she was worried about him for a while, and she did actually, back in June, when this guy initially got sick and was supposed to have come back, and wasn't answering his door. She usually saw him in her morning walks, and he wasn't there. About a week after he came back, Shadow Kisses went down to the manager of the community and asked him if he could please check on the neighbor because she was worried. And he refused to do so. He didn't want to. He didn't think it was his responsibility, even though it was. So she went to him, and he refused to check on this old man. So because there was nothing else they could do, they assumed, okay, maybe he's away at the hospital. Turns out, no, he had passed and was in there the entire time. And the thing that's frustrating is when this was discovered, this is kind of like a grim universal comedy for that freaking manager, though, because you know how they discovered the body? After all those notices had been piled up on the door, he hadn't checked on him a single time. He just pulled the notices down, and he was going to show the unit to a couple who was interested. So he opens the door, out comes the smell. They're like, what the hell is going on? He goes in, finds the body, and is like, I need to call 911. Yeah, I don't think that couple's gonna be interested in that unit anymore. But yeah, this irresponsible guy refused to go and check on him. He had no problem going up and sticking notices on the door, but he refused to check on him. And then, when Shadow Kisses found out about her neighbor passing, she was clearly, obviously frustrated. And his defense and his thing was, you have to specifically use the terminology, I would like you to do a wellness check on so-and-so in unit so-and-so. Unless you use those exact wordings, I am not bound to do so. Honestly, if I was the family of this elderly person, I would be on that guy's butt, and I would, that wouldn't fly with me. However, I think his family was out of the country, so it's a bit of a tragedy, but, that shows you some of the work ethic of some folks around here. God, I hope he is not still managing properties. So, when all was said and done, the body was removed, it essentially, like, the whole area smelled god-awful for the longest time. Obviously, because given what the coroners had to say, he had been in there since early June. So you have early June, all the way through June, July, and now to mid-August. Almost 3 months in the blazing summer sun, no windows open. I don't know how the smell was contained that long. Maybe it was because he was under the blankets or some kind of contained cocoon or pocket. I don't know. Sorry if I'm grossing you guys out. But, it was like trapped in a bubble, and when they opened that unit, it just unleashed a wave of, all the stuff in the unit had to go, because I feel like once that smell seeps into something, you're never getting it out, especially months of just, no. But basically, for those 3 whole months, every day, Shadow Kisses was living right next to a rotting corpse, with nothing but a thin, old wall separating them. Just the thought of that's a little disturbing. especially when you start to consider all the weird stuff that was happening along that connected wall. Now, what Shadow Kisses has told me what she thinks is that perhaps it could have been his spirit trying to call attention to the situation, because none of what happened in her unit was actually malicious or bad. She was just really freaked out and wanted the crucifix because of past experiences, which you can find that old story time. I believe it's called My Worst Paranormal Experience Ever. But that's another story time. So she was a little gun shy about this, so she wanted the crucifix. But in actuality, all that happened was a can of soup flying off the wall that was literally connecting them, and in the bathroom, which again was against the wall connecting them, having like her clothes tugged on and cold spots and stuff. So she thinks perhaps it could have been the old man trying to get her attention, because they were on friendly terms. They were very, like, he was a very nice, well-liked guy. But because I didn't live there during all that, I mean, I visited a lot, and I definitely got a whiff of that lovely aroma. But I can't imagine having been in that situation where you don't even know. You've been there for months. Sorry for being a little gross this time, but I just thought with all this heat, like boiling everyone to death, it might be a good story time that is relevant to this time of year. I hope you guys enjoyed this story time. I like occasionally giving you stories on this channel again and doing face cam videos, but that is all I have time for today, so I will catch you all next time. That is all for now. Bye-bye. Thanks for watching, and before you go, here's a special shout out to my patrons who donated $20 or more: Tyler Spooks, Alice Gutierrez, Kura, and Simon Leverdier Delisle. Thanks so much, you guys. If you're interested in becoming a patron and helping me to keep YouTube creepy, please feel free to check out the link in the card.